المؤمنين فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك رائحة طيبة كأنها رائحة أخي وابن عمي رسول الله فقلت نعم ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء فأقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله أتأذنوني أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء قال له وعليك السلام يا أخي ويا وسيلي وخليفتي وصاحب نواي قد أذنت لك فدخل علي تحت الكساء
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
ثم أتيت نحو الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله أتأذنوني أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء قال لا وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بدعتي قد أذنت لك فدخلت تحت الكساء فلما اكتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء أخذ أبي رسول الله بترف الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء وقال اللهم إن هؤلاء أهل بيتي وخاستي وحامتي لحمهم لحمي ودمهم دمي يؤلمني ما يؤلمهم ويحزنني ما يحزنهم أنا حرب لمن حاربهم مسلم لمن صالمهم وعدو لمن عاداهم ومحب لمن أحبهم إنهم مني وأنا منهم واجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأذهب عنهم رجسا وطهرهم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
وقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي ويا سكان سماواتي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنيا ولا أرضا مدحيا ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحرا يجري ولا فلكا يسري إلا في محبة هؤلاء الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيت النبوة ومعدن الرسالة هم فاطمة وأبوها وبعلها وبنوها.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
فقال جبرائيل يا ربي يتأذنوني لأن أهبط إلى الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك فهبط الأمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله العني ولعلا يقرئك السلام ويخصك بالتحية والإكرام ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنيا ولا أرضا مدحية ولا قمرا منيرا ولا شمسا مضيا ولا فلكا يدور ولا بحر يجري ولا فلك يسري إلا لأجلكم ومحبتكم وقد أذنني أن أدخل معكم فهل تأذنوني يا رسول الله وقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك فدخل جبريل معنا تحت الكساء وقال لأبي إن الله قد أوحى إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم رجس أهل البيت ويطهركم تطهيرا.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
فقال علي أبي يا رسول الله خبرني ما لجنوسنا هذا تحت الكساء من الفضل عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل النار وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا إلا ونزلت عليهم رحمة وحفت بهم الملائكة واستغفرت لهم إلى أن يتفرقوا. فقال علي ندعو الله فزنا وفاز شيعتنا ورب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبيا واستفاني بالرسالة نجيا ما ذكر خبرنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع من شيعتنا ومحبينا وفيهم مهموم إلا وفرج الله هما ولا مغموم إلا وكشف الله غما ولا طالب حاجة إلا وخذ الله حاجته. فقال علي رضا الله فزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شيعتنا فازوا وسعدوا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Please recite Surah Fatiha for all of our Muslims.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. روئی روئی سجاد کے قدموں سے لپٹ کر روئی زنجیر روئی زنجیر جب ہٹائی گئی قدموں سے تو ہٹ کر روئی زنجیر روئی زنجیر ساتھ عابد کے رہی بن کے عزادار حسین تار عشق غم سرور میں سمٹ کر روئی زنجیر روئی زنجیر سر کھلے دیکھ کے بل وے میں نبی کی اطرار خون میں ڈوب گئی خاک میں اٹ کر روئی زنجیر روئی زنجیر دے کے پیغام شہیدوں کا لہو دیتی ہوئی ایک ایک حلقہ زنجیر میں بٹ کر روئی زنجیر روئی زنجیر دیکھنے والا نہ تھا کوئی جہاد عابد کا کوفہ و شام کا دربار الٹ کر روئی زنجیر روئی زنجیر تھر تھرانے لگا باس مسجری کا لاشا جاتے جاتے جو سوئے نہر پلٹ کر روئی زنجیر روئی زنجیر جب بنانے لگا بیمار بہن کی تربت تھر تھر آئی کبھی قدموں سے لپٹ کر روئی زنجیر روئی زنجیر جب ہٹائی گئی قدموں سے تو ہٹ کر روئی زنجیر صلوات اللہم صل علی محمد وآل محمد اللہم صل علی محمد وآل محمد اللہم صل علی محمد وآل محمد.
Please recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of this household: Sayyid Hussain Ali, Sultanat Begum, Shahnaz Fatima, Sultan Huzur, Qaim Raza, Shahid Hussain Rizvi, Kanis Amina, Muhtasham Rizvi, Ahmad Rizvi, Abid Sirtaj Alam, Mehjabeen Alam, as well as all of our marhumin, as well as all the marhumin who have no one left to recite Surah Fatiha for them. Bismillah. Fatiha. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبو القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لعن الله والأعداء أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتبارك وتعالى في كتابه المبين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ونحن أقرب إلي من حبل الوريد. صلوات على محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So in our society today, if you look at a lot of the sociological data, if you look at a lot of the surveys that have become more prominent, religion is, for all intents and purposes, dying out. Especially in the West, which used to be a very Christian area, it used to be very much attached to religion. You see that the idea of ascribing yourself to a faith, the idea of calling yourself a religious person, is becoming less and less common in our society, especially with our young people. And I'm sure the young people, myself included, the ones that are involved in a professional, aspect in this society, we see that observing your religion is becoming less and less popular. Right? We have a lot more of this movement toward becoming, a man of science, a person of science, as opposed to religion. This conflict, however, is not new. Right? We know that this has been around since, forever. And I apologize, I know I've talked about this in detail in the past in certain speeches, but this idea, I think, bears, it really necessitates us digging deeper into it. So if you go back to, many, many hundreds of years ago, you had, this idea of the church sort of controlling the scientific evidence, the scientific data that was out there. We've all heard of Galileo, we've all heard of Copernicus, right? The idea of putting the sun in the center of the solar system was earth-shattering in a way. The church jumped on them. They said, no, you can't say this. This is going to undermine the beliefs that we have propagated for years. There was a movement to change scientific evidence, change the way science was presented to accommodate for religion, religious beliefs that were outdated. In the same sense, we see this pop up multiple times throughout our history, right? Where we see that there's maybe a change in the way paleontology is done to accommodate for the timelines that exist in Christianity. We see that there are different mental gymnastics that people often have to play to make their religion work, and because of that, it brings conflict into a picture. You have to either pick one, right? You pick science or you pick religion, and that's it. For us, however, the beauty of our faith is that these things are so intertwined. We see the beauty of Allah in absolutely everything. So when we look towards science as a body of evidence, when we look toward biology or chemistry or physics, we see our Creator. And that's something I want to talk a little bit about today. I know it's a bit technical, it's a bit different than what maybe you would be expecting from a majlis. And I have my own biases. Many of you know that I'm starting my residency and I'm recently graduated from medical school. So these are things that I think about a lot. And I think it bears our discussion because Ahlul Bayt have given us so many of these pearls that are so unbelievably consistent with what you see nowadays with modern evidence. It is impossible to think that somebody would know that 1,400 years ago without being given that message from Allah. Without ilm from Allah, there's no way that you could come up with those ideas 1,400 years ago. If you look at our Quran, those evidences, they still hold true. And this is a long, long discussion. We can talk about how Allah speaks of the creation of the heavens and the earth and how there's a lot of those parallels within science and astrophysics. We can talk about the way that gravity works, the way that the celestial bodies move according to precise calculations, which is something that Allah has mentioned in the Quran. We can talk about the contributions of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, Imam al-Baqir, and we can dig into this. And honestly, this is a discussion that would take many, many hours, many, many days. And that is such a privilege that we have as people that ascribe to the ideas of Ahlul Bayt, that we can say, we can hold this as an element of pride, that this is something that our religion does that nobody else can even claim to do. One of the most beautiful ways I think I've heard broken down is that one of the most important missions of Islam in the beginning, we talk about Jahiliyyah, there being all these weird customs and no civilization. One of the main goals of Islam, one of the main goals of the Prophet even starting his mission, was to diminish superstition within the society. If you go back and read some of the history, some of the narrations, there are specific instances where he will take a stance against certain things that Quraysh are doing that are against basically human law, basic common knowledge, common sense, common courtesy. One of the most interesting ones was, he had this ability to dispel superstition even when it was to his advantage. Where many politicians or people of power would say, okay, yeah, go with the superstition, it'll increase my power. The Prophet would say, no, we need to remember Allah. When the Prophet's son Ibrahim passed away, very young age he passed away, there was a solar eclipse on the same day. Immediately, the rumor began to circulate in society that, the eclipse is happening because Ibrahim died, the world is mourning, things like that began to take hold. The Prophet sat on the pulpit and he said, no, this eclipse that is happening, these phenomenons that happen, they are to remind us of the omnipotence of Allah. They're not because the world is grieving or because certain instances or to show off aspects of our faith. No, it is because it is a sign of Allah, and it is a sign that we should go and submit our foreheads to prayer. And that is what he did. He got off the minbar and immediately went to go and offer prayer. So not only did he dispel a superstition, he gave a reason, and he pushed people, go and appreciate your Lord when you see these types of phenomena. When you see the natural world, go and appreciate your Lord. So that's the example that Rasulullah sets for us. So very quickly, we'll go into a couple of points today. One of my absolute favorites is a quote that is attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the quote, many of you have heard of it, right? He says, your sickness is from within you, but you do not perceive it. Your remedy is within you, but you do not sense it. You presume yourself to be this small entity, but within you is enfolded the entire universe. SubhanAllah. We could sit all day and again discuss the spiritual aspect. Maybe Amir al-Mu'mineen is telling us to go and do some reflection, change our ways, understand our shortcomings, fix ourselves, improve ourselves. But one way that I kind of think of this is that it really, if you distill it down to its most important subjects, like you're talking about the entire central idea of modern medicine, right? It's homeostasis. Many of us have heard that word in like science class or things like that. The idea is that when the body gets an insult, like or some kind of stress, it'll do something to compensate. So if you're hot, you'll start to sweat. If you're cold, you'll start to shiver. So there's all these mechanisms that Allah has put in place. So and a lot of the times you're doing these things without your body, your consciousness understanding that your body is doing something. A lot of the times these changes happen to increase our comfort, to allow for our survival, and we don't even have to do anything about them. The cure is within us. If you think about maybe a diabetic patient, right? I've seen diabetic patients in the clinic. They come in and what do? You give them medication that will, maybe it's insulin. Maybe it's another medication that will lower their blood sugar. What we're doing is we're mimicking, we're trying to accommodate for a lack in that cure that is within this person. So in this sense, Amir al-Mu'mineen is showing us maybe that there is a whole other world that we have within us, that if we look towards it, we can understand that this organization that exists can be taken advantage of to allow for cures, allow for medicines, to look toward the blueprints that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, imitate those and maybe we will reach a cure. So that's the kind of idea that we can. When somebody comes in and their blood volume is low, right, their blood pressure is very low, oftentimes we'll give them a medication called a pressor, right, to increase their blood pressure to allow for their tissues to get oxygenated, right, to allow that if this person's in bad shape, at least maybe their brain will get oxygen, their heart will get oxygen, all these parts of their body will be able to survive. What we do is we're imitating what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in place. These mechanisms that exist, we take advantage of them. The disease is within us in the sense that imbalance happened. But the cure is within us as well in the sense that we have a way to replicate the mechanisms that exist to get us toward healing. Salawat Allah. And I think the most beautiful part of this is that last portion where Amir al-Mu'mineen says, enfolded within you is an entire universe. You think you're the small entity, but enfolded within you is this entire universe. How beautiful is this that Amir al-Mu'mineen is putting the dignity of the human being above everything. Yes, he's talking about the Lord. Yes, he's talking about fixing things within ourselves to improve ourselves, to heal ourselves both physically and spiritually. But he's also telling us that look at yourself in the mirror. What's within you is no fluke. What's within you is nothing to be taken for granted. You are special. You are a creation of Allah. Within you is enfolded this universe. From the smallest atom to the cell, to the tissue, to the organ system, to your entire being. Allah took His time creating you. Allah made it so that these parts and these pieces work together so that you can go about your daily function. And for that, we owe Him absolutely everything. A debt that we cannot repay in this life or in the next. Another one of the most amazing pieces and pearls of Amir al-Mu'mineen's speeches was he has this part in one of his sermons where he says how amazing is this human being. This human being who sees through a layer of fat, who speaks with a piece of flesh, hears with a bone, and breathes with a hole. Now, let me give you a quick history lesson here. Cadaver dissection was practiced by the Greeks up until about the 3rd century. After the 3rd century, the authorities cracked down and said, no, we can't do this anymore. It's inhumane for whatever religious reasons, for whatever reasons. They said no cadaver dissection. For about the next 1700 years or so, nobody was allowed to do cadaver dissection. So from the 3rd century, 1700 years later, no cadaver dissection. It wasn't a mainstream practice. Imam Ali alayhi salam is giving us an anatomy and physiology lesson through this quote. He says this human being sees through a layer of fat. This is, again, before dissection. This is before chromatography and electron microscopy. If you look at the composition of the retina today, fatty acids are fundamental in the retina. The composition of the retina has all these, stearic acids, oleic acids, whatever you want to call them, but it's fat. The one vitamin that your body really needs to make vision happen is vitamin A. Vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin. So Amir al-Mu'mineen is showing us that, look, within this faith is an appreciation for the smallest thing. A layer of fat on your eyes, you take that away, you're blind. You take the fat away from the nerve cells that conduct that signal, you're blind. You will not be able to sense this world in any way, shape, or form. You will not be able to see your loved ones. You won't be able to read a book. You won't be able to look out into the world. without that fatty acid, the layer of fat that you're able to see through, that this Lord has provided you, you won't be able to perceive this world as anything. The next portion, he says, this human being speaks with a lump of flesh. Now, this is also a prolonged discussion. The amount of times that our Imam have referenced the rights of the tongue, or the right that you have with the tongue, and using it to speak good. But Amir al-Mu'mineen is drawing attention to this again. The tongue actually is really unique. It's one of the only, I think the only muscle that isn't anchored to the skeleton. It's the only muscle you can move in 3 dimensions. Most other muscles you move in 2 dimensions. So he's drawing attention to these little pieces of beauty that he sees in the human body that Allah has created. Again, signs of our Creator. And he's drawing attention to these beautiful portions that make us truly unique amongst the creations of Allah, one by one. And my personal favorite, he says he hears through a bone. Most of us, we can feel this is not bone. It's cartilage. We've been taught this since our elementary school days, probably. It's not bone. You don't have to be a scientist to understand that. You don't have to, even back then they understood that. But he hears through a bone. Actually, this part of the ear that we can see is called the outer ear. If you go further, you have the middle ear and the inner ear. Within the middle ear, there are 3 tiny bones, very, very small, maybe the size of a couple of grains of rice each. The incus, the malleus, and the stapes. Their responsibility, sound that is propagated via air, their responsibility is to turn that into fluid signals, which then becomes electrical signals, which is how we process everything, by electrical signals. They're the bridge between 2 worlds, basically. The outer world, where sound is in the air, and the inner world, which sound is propagated differently, and we process this signal. But we hear through 3 bones. And the beauty of this structure, I'm telling you, if you look at it, Allah has even put a little muscle there, that when there's a sound that's too loud, the muscle tenses up and it'll protect the inner ear. So that the parts of your ear that are exposed basically to this outside world, the bridge to the outside world, are protected from things that are too strong for it, that might damage it, that might cause permanent harm to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us with such beauty, and Amir al-Mu'mineen is pointing to this years and years before it was even understood that these structures existed within the ear. Subhanallah. Salawat ala Muhammad. If you took these pieces of bone away, and you said, okay, fine, we don't need to hear through this bone. Scientists have done calculations as to how much you would be able to hear of this world. 3%, 0.1 to 3%. That's how much of this outer stimulus from sound throughout the world that you can hear. Think about how much that would impact your communication with your loved ones, your ability to be safe in the world. And this is a beautiful, beautiful thing that Allah has blessed us with. And Amir al-Mu'mineen is drawing attention to the beauty of creation and showing us this information. Now, the reason I read the verse, many of you have heard it many times, that Allah says that He is closer to us than your jugular vein. And many people more intelligent than myself have sat down and they've done analyses about why that is the case, what it means to be close, what that structure is in terms of closeness to you. And I think that those are all well and good, but what I never heard is in neurology, what you do is you track the vessel upward into the brain. And if you trace the jugular through the neck, where we know it is, right here, if you trace the vessel all the way into the brain, it forms a network of blood vessels that encapsulate the entire brain, that support the brain, to maintain its blood pressure within the brain, that drain toxins from the brain. So Allah is not just telling us that He's not close because I'm right here by your neck. Allah is saying, no, that thing, that brain of yours, that dictates how you feel, dictates how you act, dictates the decisions you make, that structure that encases it, that supports it, that allows it to survive, I am closer to you than that itself. So perhaps one of the ways of understanding this ayat of the Quran is not just the proximity of the neck, but we look at the things that make us tick, the things that make us who we are. And we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that those things that make you you, I know them better than you know. And I am closer to you than you can even perceive. So we see now that there is this precedent where the discoveries of today, these discoveries are not just consistent with what we know as Muslims, but they're complementary. It's not a matter of picking being a man of science or a man of religion. If you choose man of God, those things intertwine themselves and they complement one another, right? And the idea behind this, and I think a lot of the ways it gets presented is that, oh, when we say this, we're using it kind of as a slam dunk over other religions. Like, oh, we know this is in our books, this is in our hadith, so that we're completely correct and you're not. I think we should take it a step further. It's not a matter of us having more validity than another group. It's a matter of us using knowledge, using the knowledge of this world to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This body of knowledge doesn't just exist for us to, look and compare notes and see what exists within Islam and what exists within science. It exists for us to appreciate Allah even more. Allah says in the Quran, He says very, very clearly, He says, "Inna fis samawati wal ardi la'ayatin lil mu'minin." That indeed the heavens and the earth, the creation of the heavens and the earth, are signs for the believers. So what He is showing us is that it's not just a matter of picking who has the most consistent religion. It's a matter of look at the heavens, look at the earth, look at the way that they've been constructed, and see your Creator in every aspect that you possibly can. That is the main message, and I think the main takeaway of this science versus religion debate, it's the sense of which one can I see, where can I see Allah? The believer looks for Allah in absolutely everything, and science is one of those many, many things, right? The natural world is this sign of Allah, We say, in the sense that we've all been brought up with it, we say that all living things do tasbih of Allah. We say that, even Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, one time he heard a sparrow. He was sitting with some of his companions. He heard a sparrow just chirping. And he told his companions that this sparrow is praising and praying to Allah. That is its way of praying and remembering its Lord. So we see that the heavens and the earth are signs for the believers. We also need to be like that sparrow, like those living things that exist doing tasbih of Allah. And we say, subhanallah, for a creator that is able to create such complexity we can't even understand. The complexity to the point where things are going on in the world that we are completely ignorant of as a human race, we haven't discovered yet. We say alhamdulillah for the sake of the fact that these mechanisms exist within us to keep us alive, and we don't have to think about it. You don't have to think about breathing. You don't have to think about digestion. You don't have to think about all these things. Alhamdulillah for the mechanisms that Allah has put in place to allow us to exist. And subhanallah for a creator whose complexity is so infinite, so beyond what we can perceive. All He had to say was be, and this is the complexity we have. Subhanallah. The way that this heavens and the earth exist was not a matter of human beings tinkering away for thousands and thousands of years trying to figure out a way to replicate it. He said be, and this is what we ended up with. We ended up with situations, the way that the earth functions, the way the ecosystem functions, the way that our brains and bodies function in a way that we can't even replicate them if we try. And all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to say was be, and that's the situation we're in. So that's what we need to do. This religion versus science debate, to me at least, it ends up being a situation where you just have to understand that everything is a sign from Allah. That these pieces of information that we're thrown at, that are thrown at us day in and day out, it's a way for us to find our Lord in different ways, like whether that be in chemistry or in physics or biology or medicine or in the arts. Whatever you see should be a reminder of the Lord. And above all that, I think the other thing that stands out is the dignity of the human being amongst everything. The thing that is stressed is the dignity of the human being. Right? Amir al-Mu'mineen is marveling at the way our bodies are constructed. Amir al-Mu'mineen is telling us that within us is an entire universe of structures, right? Amir al-Mu'mineen is telling us that an entire universe of spirituality exists inside you. And we see that this is very consistent from point to point. Whenever we look at any sort of, religious text or, any sort of religious document within our Shia faith, we see that that's very consistent. In Dua Kumel, there's a special line in it where, we're supposed to say, "Oh my Lord, who, you are the one that organized everything so that I could be brought into existence, so that I could be brought up, so that I could be fed, so that I could be nurtured and maintained. For the sake of that nurturing, please forgive me." That's beautiful. That after all of this, the beauty of the world, the complexity of the world, the infinite nature of Allah, Allah didn't forget about you. or me or your friends. Allah made it so that we are able to get sustenance, that we are able to experience life, that we are able to find Him in one way or another. But one point to one point, we see that each and every person is able to experience that at some point or another. The other beautiful portion of our faith and our tradition that points to that dignity of the human being in the same sense, it mirrors a lot of this conversation. In Risalat al-Huquq, many of us are familiar with that document, but Imam Sajjad says, the first thing that he says in this text, if you look at the way it's organized, the first section is the right of God upon you. And then it goes on, and we know, we've seen the different sections of Risalat al-Huquq. We've seen how the book is organized in terms of rights of the parents, or rights of your neighbor, or rights of your body parts on you. But the first thing it starts with is the right of God upon you. And the beauty of it is that he says that the right of God upon you is that you worship with sincerity. You worship with ikhlas, right? You worship with no doubt in your heart. You do it for the sake of worshiping Allah. And after that point, you have a right on God. How incredible is that? We have a right on Allah. That if we worship with sincerity, Imam Zain al-Abidin says, if you worship with sincerity, you will be taken care of in this world and the akhirah. So in essence, this document, and all of our tradition is telling us this, right? Is that there are ways to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then there's ways to appreciate yourself. Don't ever take yourself or your existence for granted. Allah is telling you through this mechanism that He has put so much love and caring into you. He loves us how many times more than our own parents, our own mother, right? He says. And this organization of the world, this organization of our being, is a testament to that, is a sign of that love He has for us more than anything else. So that's our takeaway. That's our understanding in Islam, is that we look toward the examples of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. That before anything comes a relationship between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that it's almost a reciprocal relationship in a lot of ways. But who can say that they have a right over the Creator? The Creator that has done so much, that is infinite, that is beyond our understanding. We have a right over Him. How incredible is that? Then that's how you start the book off, by saying that we have a right over this Creator. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, his contributions to Islam are among these, right? He was the one that preserved our faith. He was the one that preserved our belief system so that we can experience it today. And I know we've talked about it in the past, but he has preserved our religion in the sense that he has made sure that the message of Imam Husaini alayhi salam, the message of Prophet Muhammad, the message of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the message of Bibi Fatima, Imam Hassan, that it was maintained throughout those difficult times. We would not have this appreciation for Allah, this appreciation for ourselves that no other religion has without the sacrifice of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. Imam Sajjad, who can say that their first night of Imamah was Shami Ghariba and their first day was Ashura? How difficult was this Imam's life? And that, yes, he was among the first Azadar of Imam Husaini alayhi salam, but what toll must this have taken on him? We see that this is an Imam who was sick, and yes, he was not able to function very well on the day of Ashura, but he sees his father at the end of the day and is not able to recognize him. He asks, where is Ali Akbar? Where is Abbas? Where is Qasim? And at every point, Imam Husaini alayhi salam says, no, he has been killed. He has been martyred. He has been killed. We see that this is an Imam who, after Karbala, lived a life like no other. When he would be brought water to do wudu, he would cry so much that the water would become salty. He couldn't do wudu. He would say, my father didn't get this water. I'm able to do wudu with this water. My father was killed thirsty. My father was killed thirsty. He would walk through the market, and maybe he would stop at a butcher's shop, and he would ask the man, he would ask the butcher, he would say, this animal that's here for sale, whose meat is for sale, did you give it water before it was killed? How did you treat it in the days before it was killed? And the man would say, no, you're Rasulullah, your grandfather taught us a very good way to do this in the most humane way possible. I gave him food, I gave him water, I made sure it was as comfortable. I took him away from his family before I slaughtered this animal. And Imam Sajjad would cry and say, my poor father was treated worse than the beasts of this nation. That he was killed in front of his family, in front of his friends. He was killed in a way that no other person has been killed. We see that this is an Imam who would be invited by people. People would try to bring him into society, say, look, come to my wedding, come to this happy gathering I'm having. And Imam would say, no, I cannot attend this wedding. After seeing what I saw in Karbala, after all my family being killed, how can I go to a wedding? How can I be happy? But if you hold a gathering for the remembrance of my father, of course I will attend. Of course I will attend. This is an Imam that dedicated himself to teaching people about Karbala, to teaching people about Islam. They would say that he had such an empathy for people. He would go to the market and he would buy every slave possible that he could find. He would house them in his home. He would teach them. He would teach them Quran, and then he would free them. And they would say, Mullah, why are you freeing us? He would say, just go wherever you settle down. Tell people what happened to my father in Karbala. The one condition I have for your freedom, just go and talk to people about Hussein. Tell them what happened on Ashura. This is an Imam that when that time came, the bodies were scattered across the plains of Karbala under the hot sun. Banu Asad arrived and they had never seen anything like this. They were unsure what to do, where to start. All these bodies, these pieces of bodies lying everywhere under the sun. They didn't know what to do, and all of a sudden a figure appears. It's Imam Sajjad. Imam Sajjad comes and he goes and he allots everybody a job. He says, this was the body of Ali Asghar. This was the body of Qasim. This was the body of Muhammad. He goes one by one and he tells everybody what happens, and they bury these people. Perhaps there comes that time where Sajjad goes to the banks of Furat. People maybe wonder where he's going. Where is he gone? You see Sajjad go and pick up the pieces of a body and put them into a grave. He said, my Uncle Abbas, how we miss you. Imam Sajjad returns. He helps dig this grave. He puts Ali Akbar at the feet of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. He puts Ali Asghar on the chest of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They fill the grave with soil. And Imam writes on this grave, this is the grave of Hussein who was killed without water. Ala la'natullahi ala qawm al-zalimeen. Fatima Hussein.
आबिद को जहां गश आता है, दुर्रों से जगाया जाता है। आबिद को जहां गश आता है, दुर्रों से जगाया जाता है। आबिद को जहां गश आता है, दुर्रों से जगाया जाता है। आबिद को जहां गश आता है, दुर्रों से जगाया जाता है। एक फूल है जिसको काटो पर, एक फूल है जिसको काटो पर, दिन रात जलाया जाता है। आबिद को जहां गश आता है, दुर्रों से जगाया जाता है। आबिद को जहां गश आता है, दुर्रों से जगाया जाता है। आबिद को जहां गश आता है, दुर्रों से जगाया जाता है। आबास की गैरत से अक्सर आबिद की असीरी पूछती है, क्या 4 बरस की बहना को, क्या 4 बरस की बहना को जिंदा में सुलाया जाता है। جلتے ہیں شولوں میں گھری ہے آل نبی پھر آج نبی کی بیٹی پر پھر آج نبی کی بیٹی پر دروازہ گرایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دروں سے جگایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دروں سے جگایا جاتا ہے رہ کے شہیدی دیکھتے ہیں زینب سکینہ کی جانب رہ کے شہیدی دیکھتے ہیں نیزے سے سکینہ کی جانب لگتا ہے کہ پوچھتے نا کے پہ لگتا ہے کہ پوچھتے نا کے پہ بچی کو گرایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے بی بی کو قریب لاش جری دروں کی اذیت دیکھتے ہیں عباس کو تڑپانے کے لیے عباس کو تڑپانے کے لیے زینب کو ستایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے غیرت کی سبب جس بی بی نے گھر میں بھی نہ دیکھا آئینہ غیرت کے سبب جس بی بی نے گھر میں بھی نہ دیکھا آئینہ بے پردہ اسے لانے کے لیے بے پردہ اسے لانے کے لیے دربار سجایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے وہ نہ کسی نا پر غیرت سے رکتا ہی نہیں گر جاتا ہے وہ نہ کسی نا پر غیرت سے رکتا ہی نہیں گر جاتا ہے ہر جب جب بھی سرے عباس جری جب جب بھی سرے عباس جری نیزے پہ چڑھایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے دونوں کسی نا پر غیرت سے رکتا ہی نہیں گر جاتا ہے اور جب جب بھی سرے عباس جری جب جب بھی سرے عباس جری نیزے پہ چڑھایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے جگایا جاتا ہے پردے میں بلال کرب بلا روئے نہ میرے مولا کیوں کر افسوس کے تربت میں جب تک افسوس کے تربت میں اب تک زہرا کو رلایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں بشراتا ہے دردوں سے ہے جس کو کاٹو پر ایک پھول ہے جس کو کاٹو پر دن رات جلایا جاتا ہے عابد کو جہاں آتا ہے دروں سے جگایا جاتا ہے
ہائے میرا بیمار ماں ہائے میرا بیمار ہائے میرا بیمار ماں ہائے میرا شاہ انام بعد قتل شاہ انام غیر غربت کی وہ شام بعد قتل شاہ انام غیر غربت کی وہ شام غش میں پڑا ہے تشنا کام ہو جائے غم سے نہ تمام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا زخم لہو برساتا ہے زخم لہو برساتا ہے زخم لہو برساتا ہے زخم لہو برساتا ہے دل ہے کہ چھلکاتا ہے زخم لہو برساتا ہے دل کا جاتا ہے در کھاتا جاتا ہے لمحہ لمحہ کام بکام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام بغض و حسد سے کینوں سے 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 لو دیتے ہوئے سینوں سے بغض و حسد سے کینوں سے لو دیتے ہوئے سینوں سے کلمہ کو بے دینوں سے چلتا ہوا بازار شام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا چھپے ہاتھ بندھے ہیں سر ہے کھلے سامنے ہے ایک مجمع عام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام مجمع سارا ہنستا ہے مجمع سارا ہنستا ہے مجمع سارا ہنستا ہے مجمع سارا ہنستا ہے دل کا زہر اگلتا ہے مجمع سارا ہنستا ہے دل کا زہر اگلتا ہے خون کے آنسو روتا ہے سر کو جھکائے تشنا کام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام ہائے میرا بیمار امام کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع اور پیغمبر کا کنبہ کلمہ گویوں کا مجمع اور پیغمبر کا کنبہ حیدر ننگے کھڑا آج سرے دربار شام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام آئے میرا بیمار امام تیر سا دل پہ لگتا ہے 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 ایک رسن میں بستا ہے تیر سا دل پہ لگتا ہے ایک رسن میں لگتا ہے شمر ستم گر ہنستا ہے لے لے کر ایک ایک کا نام ہائے میرا بیمار امام 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 ہائے میرا بیمار
السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى وارث أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين وقاسم بن الحسن مسلم بن أخيل وهاني بن عروة وحبيب بن مظاهر وحر الشهيد الرياحي. السلام عليكم جميع شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان 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 من فتنة الزمان وشر الشيطان. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا مدهر الإيمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهل الله تعالى مخرجك وظهورك وجعلنا من أنصارك وأعوانك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة الحسن صلواتك عليه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا ونصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك وتوكل وتعطيه فيها تغييرا برحمتك يا